Thanks all for joining us for our issue investigation series on data center in coastal Georgia. Today, we're going to specifically be talking about um, what can my community do and how might my community be affected. I've got some really great colleagues here with me that are going to be super helpful and pass on information as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Without further ado, I'm going to jump forward to our next slide, and that is our agenda. So welcome. We are glad to have you here. I'm going to do a quick introduction to OHM, introduce our presenters for today, talk broadly about the uniqueness of coastal Georgia, some of the ecological impacts that we see, and that we covered in our past issue investigation number 1 and 2. We're going to talk about kind of the pathways to data center approval and what the kind of rules look like and how it's very nuanced and it's a very important to kind of know how that process works in order to engage as an individual. We're going to give a broad update from our coastal advocates, talk about some actions you as a community member can take, as a citizen can take, and then we'll do our Q&A. We're going to go pretty fast because I know there's lots of questions out there in the world, and we want to leave plenty of time for that. Um, Without further ado, this is me. I'm Eric Swanson. I'm the Advocacy Education Coordinator for 100 Miles. I work to connect people with the issues that they care about and help to elevate their voice, and that's kind of my role. I work really hard to find ways that are novel and interesting to teach people how to best contact the people that represent them and how to best be vocal about the things that they care about, tie them to the place that they live. We're going to introduce next from north down to south our advocates. So I'll let Dr. Jeff come off mute and introduce himself.
Hi, all. I am Jeff Beauvais. I cover Bryan, Chatham, and Effingham counties, 100 miles. And I was born and raised in Savannah. Lived away for about 10 years in either Atlanta or Athens or DC, and really wanted to come home and start a family here with my wife. And luckily, 100 Miles was hiring right around the time we wanted to do that. So it all sort of worked out, and very happy to be back here and working on protecting a coast that I grew up enjoying and playing in, and I love, and I hope my uh, soon to be child will be out there with me too. So nice to meet y'all, virtually at least.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. I think Midcoast next. Awesome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Echo what Eric was saying about taking your time and listening in. And yes, I'm from the Mid-Coast. That includes McIntosh and Liberty County. I'm actually in the Darien office. So if you didn't know, we have, besides the Savannah office and our Brunswick office, we also have one in Darien. And so continue to keep asking questions and reach out to any of us at any time. Appreciate you. Thank you.
And then Kat.
Hello, thank you. Yep, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Kat Montgomery. I'm the South Coast Advocate, so I cover Glenn, Camden, and Brantley County. So thank you everybody for being here to learn about data centers.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. To introduce OHM, I think I did it in the opposite order, but when we think about OHM, we think about who are we? And we're some of the staff that we showed right here. We have 16 staff members, a super committed board of directors, and we work to help connect residents and visitors to kind of the issues facing our coast and help them take action to protect it. We wear lots of hats, but at the base level, we're all conservationists. So we bring lots of different expertise. We like to connect people to that expertise, but we all want to conserve and protect the 100 miles of the Georgia coast. So we have this broad and beautiful vision of creating a future where our coast has thriving communities, protected landscapes, and secure wildlife. And we do this kind of with a three-pronged approach. We have community engagement, getting out in the community, figuring out what's going on. We have education, so teaching people about the value of our coasts, getting them experiencing the coast. And then we have advocacy, so finding out how to best advocate for and protect those special areas. But it's all about people too, right? We live here, and so does everything else. So you have to think about how we're all tied together. So that's us at OHM. I'm sure many of you know of us. I'm sure many of you have joined us for our webinar on data centers in the past, or at least maybe viewed our presentations recorded. We will be recording this presentation and this here link. These two are linked for our past two to view those. You'll be receiving an email as part of this if you're registered. It'll have all those resources. You can go back or always look them up on our YouTube at 100 miles and talk about data centers, site and scale, our first one, and then ecological impacts on coastal Georgia, where we had Alice Kai's visit with us. So super, super fun look at data centers and kind of a really broad approach that we've attempted with this webinar series for upcoming our quality of life impacts on coastal Georgia residents. Is going to be a fun one as well. Um, if you're joining us on social media, you can grab out your phone, scan this QR code. That will be able to register you for this event on Zoom, and then you can go and view back past webinars as well. So if you'd like to do that, I invite you to do that now. 3, 2, 1, go. And then we're going to recap. What are data centers? We're going to do a quick recap. So they're just the physical infrastructure of the internet. They house these big servers and networking equipment, supporting systems that cool things down, provide power backup, fire suppression, and broadly security. They keep our digital services running reliably. Um, they're used to hold data that make up the cloud or cloud computing, and these computers and hardware have to be kept in specific kind of environmental conditions to remain functional. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Um, Citing vulnerabilities for coastal Georgia, which we always want to highlight when we're thinking about what would a data center be exposed to here? Hurricanes and flooding is a big one for us. So 56% of planned data centers are in states at high risk of severe storms. Um, and we really want to make sure that we have infrastructure that remains resilient during those storms. So is the data center a best fit for those reasons with our heat and our humidity? Also because of the fact that most data centers also generate a lot of heat. Is that a thing we want to add to our coast? And then the big one that can be really problematic if you're really close to the coast is saltwater exposure, as that's never good with technology getting saltwater exposure. So we think of these as our big ones that we like to highlight and the questions we like to ask when we're hearing about data centers coming to coastal Georgia. This is where our site is not necessarily the most conducive. When you think about data centers, are they on the coast? Not yet. This is a map of where they're at. The size of the circle relates to the size of the data center in this graphic from World Resource Institute. You can see we don't have any in coastal Georgia. They are in coastal South Carolina and coastal Florida. It is something that we are lucky to have a really protected coast. And if we don't want data centers to be on our coast, we need to talk about what my community can do. And so you'll hear more about that throughout. So big ecological concerns that we covered in kind of our second issue investigation is they create heat islands that disrupt local ecosystems. They have large footprints that are full of impermeable surfaces. They increase runoff, so there's flooding concerns. They require designated transmission lines, so they're large load consumers of energy, so they actually fragment property even more so because they have to create transmission lines to get the power to the site unless they're developing power plants on site, which is possible for large data centers. They have a large amount of noise pollution, which disrupts our animals that vocalize to create breeding habitats or breeding populations talking to each other, communicating. So that's always an issue. And then we always want to highlight that data centers require redundancies that often mean that there is large diesel generators creating localized air quality concerns. And that's for wildlife, but also for people. So where is the power coming from if we have a power grid failure during a natural disaster? So that's a brief overview. Again, go back to our number two, issue investigation number two, to learn more about our ecological concerns, especially around water. Um, and then there we go. So we're going to jump right into the idea of how do data centers get built. There's lots of scenarios and there's so much nuance, and because there's not a broad framework and there's no statewide laws or federal laws regarding data centers, we have to think about it of what your county is doing. So a developer may approach a landowner within your county or within your city. They have to work on getting permitting for that data center to be allowed. The permitting process can be really easy or really hard, depending on the size and the scale or the existing ordinances and zoning in the area. Um, then the data center is actually like physically designed. So it's really interesting when we are talking about data centers, design may be proposed, but they don't often have a physical design in place until they can get permitted, until they know the site and they can know the parameters for building out. So construction would happen once that permitting and design is submitted. Then we have an idea of how we get energy and water to the site. That happens, and then commissioning happens. And commissioning is basically bringing data centers online because data centers can't operate with downtime. They have to kind of always be operating once they come online. Commissioning is that slow process of making sure all the systems work in order to say, we're ready to come online, give us all that data, give us all of our proposed kind of load that we will see. So from a volume and from a resource use standpoint, that's kind of how things happen. But we wanted to run through some quick scenarios on how a data center might get built in an individual city or county. And we're going to talk about that from the standpoint of kind of these scenarios here and what a county and city has as far as ordinance, how the community engages, the zoning, or is zoning permitted? Is there a permitted use for data centers? And does the data center get built? And so for this first scenario, the city or county does not have a specific data center ordinance. There's no real community input. There is zoning, though, that is permitted for industrial development in an area, and a data center can get built. That's kind of like a worst case scenario because there's no engagement from the community. There's just the county rules allow for a data center to be built. The other option for scenario two, or a possibility for scenario two, is that the county or city has an ordinance. Maybe that ordinance is a little bit more permissive, or it's written in a way where data centers are an allowable thing. The community doesn't have input in the ordinance and the development of the ordinance, and so their views aren't seen. The zoning is permitted, meaning that as an industrial use, data centers can get built, and then data centers are built out. So this is possible, and this can happen in our current situation in some coastal counties. Um, our county and city can have an ordinance, and it is a really well-written ordinance because it received community inputs, because there are community benefit agreements in place, because the community is listened to by its county commissioners or its city. There is a zoning permit allowed for, or the zoning does allow or does permit a data center to be built. That could be yes or no, but this is another engagement point. If it's a no, and the area of land has to be rezoned, then that's another engagement point because the county requires a vote to rezone that land. So zoning is our friend in this case. And so if we have to rezone, then the county has to vote. Then there's another option for community input at county commission meetings or city meetings. Data centers could be built in this case as a no, or in this scenario as a no, because the ordinance itself is so well written that the data center does not want to build because they don't want to listen to the demands of the county and of this and of the community. They may choose not to build that site. They may, like we see in scenario 4, choose to build. So there's always the opportunity that the county or city has an ordinance. It's a good and well-written ordinance. It received community input. The zoning is possible, so it might be zoned industrial. Data centers are a acceptable use for that industrial zoning, and a data center gets built because the community believes that that's a data center that we want in our area. There are a lot of things that I want to say that are extremely nuanced, and we don't necessarily have time for all of them. But this graphic itself, this table, is basically to break down what we have seen and what we know about our individual counties, in that there is a kind of different scenario from one to the next. And there's different scenarios that are either really well done or sometimes a little bit more permissive. And so, what we as an organization want to remind you all is that there's many different pathways for a data center to get built. We want to make sure that the pathway for a data center to get built, if it happens, does have a lot of community input. And I work really well in tables and graphics like this, and I know other people don't. So if it's confusing or if you have any questions, please let me know. I also want to ask if there's any clarifying points from our advocates before we move on. Think we're good? Okay, awesome. I know we're trying to go fast because we know there's going to be lots of questions. We're going to move on to our coastal counties update. We're going to start at the north and move south. Please do, if anything jumps up as a question, we want clarification, write that in the Q&A and we will get to that at the very end. Without further ado, Jeff, it's all you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So imagine a lot of you are here because of the recent news about the OpenAI proposal for Effingham County. That was announced just last Wednesday. It became public knowledge. And sort of to Eric's point about how this happened, one, I want to say we're still trying to figure out a lot of the details on it because it happened 6 days ago. And like, I think everybody, there's a considerable amount to read, a considerable amount to ask, and a considerable amount still to find out. But what we've been able to determine so far is that during the process of Effingham County generally updating its zoning ordinances, their ordinances were old and they embarked at some point, we believe in 2023 or 2024. It's a little bit before I started, or sorry, in 2024, that they embarked on a big overhaul and rewrite of their zoning ordinances. And during that process, data centers were included as a permitted use in some of the industrial zoning. And that is what has set the stage for what we learned about last week. So Effingham County does have an ordinance related to data centers. It is as bare bones as an ordinance can get. It is simply a definition, a very generic definition of what a data center is, and then permitting it in the heavy industrial zoning and conditional use in I believe in the planned development zoning. So that is very bare bones. That is really it. Another municipal government or municipal, Rincon also passed a data center ordinance back in early March of this year. It has a few more provisions than the Effingham County, has a few more restrictions, things like how large the lot must be for it to be on, some rules around, providing visual screens and things to break the line of sight of, generators and things of that nature. But it is also very limited relative to stronger ordinances and laws we've seen in other cities across the US. Port Wentworth, as many of you know, we discussed this in a prior issue investigation as well, passed ordinance back in December of 2025. It is stronger, certainly, than the Effingham County and Rincon ordinance, but it's still very permissive, and doesn't have as many protections and safeguards for communities as we would expect and like to see for such a sensitive topic. And in a bit of positive news, Garden City passed a 6-month moratorium on data centers back in June. So that right now is the state of play for the North Coast. I know that, Mayor Johnson in Savannah and some other officials have said that Chatham County is not going to entertain data centers. But we have yet to see them formalize that through any sorts of rules. So that process is still ongoing, but we need strong rules in place. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a few slides of why having strong laws is, not a bad thing. Like, we need strong laws about these things. So yeah, we will talk more about Effingham County, I'm sure, in the questions, but right now the answer is there's still a lot everybody is finding out, and Effingham County has very weak laws related to data centers. So, Kat, do you want to cover what's happening in our southern portion of the coast?
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. So just to kind of zoom out for a second. So I'm sure, y'all can see there's a lot of counties and a lot of cities on the coast who are talking about this. So that's a positive, that people are wanting to, figure out what to do about this new emerging industry. So what I've seen in the South Coast is, again, many counties, many cities have already started this process. Glenn County is currently the only place in my region that actually has an ordinance in place. Oh, sorry, and the city of St. Mary's. That's a little special one we'll talk about also. But so Glenn County, in a similar way to Effingham, they recently rewrote their entire zoning code. So in that rewrite, it was suggested to them by the county attorney that it's better to have an ordinance about this new industry than to not have one. So they chose to include it. And so that's why it is now in effect, because their new zoning codes went into effect on July 1st. Though I did hear from the planning and zoning department of Glenn County that they are considering removing that ordinance to to bolster it, to strengthen it up, because there's also not a lot of protections in place on that one. So, but it's good to hear that Glenn County would like to do that. Um, and then we have Brantley County. So they've also been, they're in the process of drafting their ordinance. The most recent copy that I've had has been from February, though there's been some speculation. There's another copy. So we're not really sure where they're landing yet, but we just know they're currently writing it. They don't appear to be interested in doing a moratorium. They just want to get it done and write it out. But further down the coast, we're actually seeing some folks do some moratorium. So Camden County was the first one with their 9-month moratorium. So that was passed in May. So I believe later at the end of the year, that's when that will expire. So they have that time for themselves. And then also City of Kingsland shortly followed them with a 1-year moratorium. Something that I've noticed in all of these counties, each ordinance or draft ordinance has the condition to be special use only, which is a very good first step. It means that in all of these counties in the South Coast region, that a company just couldn't come in and say, we want to build this here, let's do it, and it's in the codes, we're going to do it right now. Special use is they have to apply, they have to go before the county commissioners or the city council, and then they have to approve it. So that adds another step in the process for you to engage, you know? So if you see a public notice that indicates that that this new industry is showing up in your town, you know, that gives you a time to jump in and give your thoughts about it. Also, I just want to say, you know, if you're concerned about your county passing these, you could talk to them about it. You know, call them, send them an email. They would really love to know your thoughts, honestly. I called every single one of my counties before this talk, and they really, you know, they wanted to talk. So that was good to hear too. But I think that's kind of all the updates for right now before we jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. We're
Thanks.
going to move on to kind of a little bit about moratoriums. We've been working on this idea of pressing pause, right? So, what does pressing pause mean? It means for the most of us, it means a moratorium. A moratorium temporarily suspends kind of specific government action during a time period. So you saw in Cat's update, some are 9 months, some are a year. Um, it gives time, moratorium gives time for coastal Georgians to better understand the effects of data centers and AI on coastal Georgia. It allows for engagement, so it allows those community members that are going to be affected to engage with elected officials and staff to have transparent and open conversations. So everything is out in the open. And it sets up protections and ordinances to ensure that data centers can be good neighbors. So it allows for time to formalize the laws that would allow for or disallow a data center from being developed in your area. And the next slide. Awesome. Jeff, I think you were going to go over
Yeah.
ordinances. Yeah.
So we said ordinances a lot, and just to make it clear, an ordinance is just a law passed by a local government. And what we have been trying to make clear to our local governments, and what I think is valuable for community members to continue to make clear to your local governments, even if they have adopted an ordinance relating to data centers, is that a moratorium is valuable for a lot of reasons. It is not a purely symbolic gesture. That is something that I have heard some people try to argue, and I fundamentally disagree with that. Because it is not solely symbolic, because what we have been saying is you're not just doing a moratorium, you are doing a moratorium and you're using that time where you have no threat of a data center application swooping in unexpected, to really work with your community to write a law that is reflective of the will of the people there. That is why it is not symbolic. It gives you time to do the work and write a good law. So we, as an organization, have looked at other examples of stronger laws throughout the country. We've also worked with other nonprofit environmental organizations that have experience at this with this at the federal and state level. Because Atlanta is such a hub for these things, on developing a model or a draft ordinance that local governments can use to start to frame and think about, well, what would be right for our area? We have made it really clear that the model ordinance we've developed is not, the end all be all. It's not something they immediately need to pass as is, right? It is a conversation starter that is pointing our local governments to major issue areas related to data centers and thinking, okay, how can we minimize the negative environmental and quality of life impacts of these things in order to protect our community? And so ordinance writing is very important because, like I said, with Effingham County, there's just a definition and it says it's permitted. There's nothing in that ordinance that is going to empower Effingham County to hold OpenAI to the promises that they are making. Having a strong law on the books is better than a memorandum of understanding or a negotiation over contract terms. If you had something in that ordinance that said a data center is only permitted if you use a closed loop system that minimizes water consumption, that is much stronger than a company just promising that they're going to do it because the economics work out. That is not something that is one easy to determine up front, uh, or that has legal force and effect if they change their mind and hey, the economics actually don't work out. We're going to use more water intensive technology. So we really want to emphasize that if you are someone who is in, a Chatham County, if you're in an unincorporated Chatham County, or you're in Pooler, or you are in Richmond Hill, I'm just thinking of my North Coast areas. Whenever you're asking for a moratorium, it's really important to emphasize that that time granted by the moratorium be used to draft model ordinances or draft an ordinance. And there are models and examples that are strong that are out there, even beyond what we have put out, that you can use to start pressing your local elected officials to go ahead and draft something that is reflective of what the community wants. And how do we know what the community wants? Well, that is going to be the next piece, is how we enable the local government to actually get that kind of information into the decision-making process. So I think, Kat, you covering this?
Yes. So yeah, just to jump off of what Jeff was saying, right? We want our local officials to use this time, not just to pass the time, not to say, all right, we're going to pause this for 6 months, 9 months, maybe we'll let it get quiet and then we'll just go about business as usual. We want them to use this time to really find the facts to make sure that each ordinance is crafted to fit what the county or city needs. So something that we have really liked is in our neighboring state of Florida, in Nassau County, they enacted a year-long moratorium and started to do a fact-finding committee. So it was like over a month long of them getting in experts and, from all different types I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. They got a bunch of experts in one place, which can be hard to do, to talk about the all, types of aspects that go into this industry. So they got, water experts, they got realtors, lawyers, all kinds of people, because we just need the information. This is a new industry. And a lot of our coastal counties have been getting their information from one source, which is Loudoun County, Virginia, which I'm sure Eric has probably talked about in past talks, that is the hub of this new industry. It's where the most of these centers are. So we have not really seen our coastal counties seeking clarity on how this new industry will impact our unique coastal environment, right? So that's why we are really encouraging everyone to use this time to engage in fact finding, because what works in a landlocked area, it's probably not, might not work in our area that has, marshes, wetlands, hurricanes, all kinds of things that folks are not considering in other spaces. So if you live in a county that already has a moratorium, like I said earlier, just please call and ask what their plans are. See if they are planning to do some kind of fact-finding mission, or, host town halls to just explain what's going on to people. Because something that I have seen just, being out in the counties is everyone just wants the correct information on this. So ask your county to host town halls, to do the fact-finding committees, because that's what they're there for. We want to make sure that any type of new industry that comes in will be to the plus of the community, right? Not a negative.
And I'm here to cover kind of community benefit agreements, which we've talked about a little bit, but there's really great models out there as well. And community benefit agreements, similar to ordinances, are allowed to kind of start the conversation and allow for all the parties involved to look at what a data center should do in order to benefit the community. And these things are that NAACP has a really great model, and breaks down what the community advisory board process would look like. So this is important to note that it's separate from some kind of the fact finding that Kat was talking about. Community advisory boards are community members that are concerned, that are coming in, and they're developing as a product a community benefit agreement. And that community benefit agreement is an agreement between the county, the city, and or the county or the city and the developer that has the community's voice included. And so that community benefit agreement should always take into account quantifiable data. What is going to be the impact on job opportunities, tax revenue? Are there going to be workforce training programs? What happens to the health of people living next to? Is there going to be investment broadly in community infrastructure? Are there any other proposed benefits of the city? Does it increase traffic? Does it decrease traffic? Those things need to be included as part of the way we think about our ordinance writing process, and they should be legally binding. They should be made to be part of our laws so that these industries that move in are held to a standard that is created by and a product of the communities where they are located. So, community benefit agreements, and also the processes that we've mentioned, ordinances, internal groups working on the kind of all of the different components of data centers all have links. So anything that's underlined within the presentation will take you back to those links for all of those resources. So when we get you that presentation, once we've wrapped this live portion up, you can click through the presentation and get to all those really important details if you want to learn more, do a deep dive. The last thing I will say, and this is kind of our um, our role as 100 Miles is that we engage in the State House. We go up to Atlanta, our advocates go up there, our planners go up there, our conservation strategists go up there, and we talk to lawmakers. And what we found last year was that there was 20 plus pieces of legislation that were talking about data centers. These were introduced in both the House and the Senate. None of them passed. None of them passed. None of them reached the governor's desk or had a chance to be signed into law. A lot of that is because of the data center industry being new and the state of Georgia saying, let's leave these decisions up to the county. Um, in kind of the simpler version of that is that you can say no to data centers. So the state of New York just enacted a moratorium on new hyperscale data center construction. That is, big data centers. They said don't belong in New York right now. We need to find out more. We need to learn more. This is something that we will be engaging with once the new legislative session starts. Um, we know there will be a flurry of bills and writing and new ways of thinking about data centers because a new session starts this year. And so, in the first 6 weeks of the second half of our 2 year session that happened in 2026, there was more than 300 data center bills introduced by 30 different states nationwide. In our state, 20 plus pieces of individual legislation introduced during the first part of January. It is top of mind for a lot of people. It is something that we are engaging in, and we will keep you updated in that regard. But right now, all of the onus to do something is on the cities and counties locally. So that's why we're approaching it in that way. But we don't want to be we would be remiss to not talk about our role at the state level and what's happening there. So we will
Yeah.
let you know when January January starts, what
And
data
Eric, can
centers
I
are.
hop on that?
Yes, of course.
As you are considering reaching out to your elected officials to talk about this, and I want to emphasize that that is always an option. I think a lot of people, if it's your first time dealing with that, the thought of like contacting your mayor or your county commissioner or your city councilman is a little daunting. But these are just people. Sometimes we don't agree with them, but especially if you are a constituent of their district, they should take time to meet with you, and you should not feel shy about directly reaching out and voicing your concerns. That is what they are literally elected there to do. And it is not something you are imposing on them. That is their duty. And in all of this, when Eric is talking about the failure of the state legislature to act on any of the data center bills that were before them this January through April, um, that is something that your local rep should be very aware of and should know. The state, who knows what will happen with, the state level elections. We don't know what any new administration is going to bring in terms of their position in relationship to data centers. But there are a lot of very powerful groups and trade associations that worked very hard to make sure that nothing got passed at the state level this year. They are going to be doing the exact same thing next year, regardless of who gets elected. So your local rep needs to understand that they cannot sit on their hands and wait for the state to take action. Uh, they need to take matters into their own hands and figure this out and what is right for their communities themselves. They are not going to be saved. So,
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you, Jeff. As we move on, we've created a list of questions. These live in lots of different places, but we wanted to put them here because these are the sort of questions that when we talk about talking with our and speaking to our representatives, this is what we talk about. So Kat's going to go through them. This list could be 6 pages long, though. I just want to highlight that as well.
Yes. So yeah, these are some questions that you can ask your local officials. So number one, ask and call, hey, does my county even have an ordinance for data centers? That's a good question. And then you can, know exactly where they are in the process. Because some people, they might be, wanting to write an ordinance. They're thinking about it. They're introducing it. You'll be surprised at the great information you can get when you just call and ask. So then the second question is, what is the permitting process? So that kind of goes into what we mentioned earlier is, if there is an ordinance, is it by right? Meaning that, hey, if it fits in the zoning and somebody wants to build it there, they can. Or is it special use where if somebody wants to build it, they still have to kind of ask and show some, initial things before it's approved. So just, calling and clarifying all of those steps would be great for you. And then also, is there a CBA? That's our community benefit agreement. I haven't personally seen a county that I've worked in introduce this topic yet, so this would be a great one to have folks call and ask about. And then the last question we have written is, can we have a vote for a moratorium to press pause to get these things in place? Again, as Jeff said, you just need to call and ask them. They're there for you. They're there to answer your questions, so let them know. I also wanted to quickly say, I forgot to mention this earlier, something else in the process could be a rezoning. So in the South Coast counties, particularly, like I was saying, a lot of the ordinances that are being drafted or the ones that are in place are special use only. That's good. And they're all for different types of industrial zones. Like when I called Glenn County to, prep for this talk, they said, yeah, right now we do have an ordinance. We might want to work on it more, but it's only special use and it can only go in our specified industrial zones. That's all fine, except when an applicant wants to rezone a parcel of land. So in the South Coast region, there's a lot of forested land. And one example is in the city of Kingsland in May 2026, there was a rezone from a large forest agricultural parcel was going to be rezoned to industrial, and it has been confirmed by the landowner that that rezone was for a data center. So if you live in an area with a lot of forested land, really be on the lookout for any kind of rezoning notices that come up for agriculture to industrial. And when slash if that happens, ask those questions during the process. Say, why is this land being rezoned? Do you know why it's being rezoned? Is it for a specific industrial user? Start to unravel the pieces there because what we've seen is, yeah, there people are starting to put these plans in place. So the more information you have on the front end, the better you'll be through the whole process.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat. And so we're going to move into questions here soon, but I wanted to let you all know that we have a fourth webinar coming up where we'll talk about quality of life impacts on coastal Georgia residents. We saved this one for last specifically because we're going to do some case studies and we're going to look at how data centers have been built out in other areas and the effect on those communities. Especially in the Atlanta area, which, as many of you may know, is the second largest data center market in the US, just behind Virginia, Northern Virginia, which Kat mentioned. So, if you are not yet aware of that, please do register. There'll be a QR code coming up. We are really, really wanting to emphasize this slide. So, it can be very over the top of a lot of people's head or overwhelming or really feel very big when a data center comes to town, especially with the backing of some very large corporations and very large amount of money. And we want to be clear that what we do here is bring expertise and find ways to support communities, and we want you to reach out and we want to hear from you. So we're a very small team, but we do have a lot of expertise and we do want to hear from you. So if you scan that QR code, it creates an email directly to me. I can connect you with anyone on our team that you have questions about. We are very, very much utilizing our communities in the coast to keep us aware and abreast of things that are happening as well. So you are kind of our advocacy network, and we appreciate you for letting us know that anything seems a little fishy or is popping up because it helps us to do our job, which is to protect the coast. So please do reach out, scan that QR code if you've got an email or a question you'd like to send to me, and I can connect you to all of our advocates. Again, like I said, this QR code can take you to register for the series. So if you're joining us on social media, this QR code registers you so that you receive those resources. We're making sure that you get links to everything that we had in our presentation today and the recording as well. So do follow up with us that way or go to our website, 100miles.org/issues investigation to learn more or /data centers. You can register there as well too. So it's all kind of tied together. So thank you for that. We do want to amplify this information as much as possible. And last but not least is we're going to hear from you, questions that you may have. I'm going to actually stop my share and we'll get real big in your face for a second. Awesome. And it looks like we might have a question. Awesome. So, okay. I read the question and should have been reading out loud. So the question is there model language in community benefits agreements or ordinance for dismantling the facilities when a data center is no longer viable? So I think Jeff may have some information on this. I know that we've also, as an organization, talked about decommissioning centers. So if you could give some background on that, Jeff, that'd be great.
Yeah, the model ordinance we have discusses a decommissioning study requirement as part of the application process. There are also concepts that are typically more reserved for things like big power plants, but we believe could be applied to a data center where you have things like decommissioning bonds, where the money is set where that helps finance the expensive prospect of cleaning up a data center. What I think a lot of people forget about and what I have experienced in my conversations with elected officials, so it's really good that you are aware of this, is, what happens when either upgrades are required because technology progresses and components of that facility will need to be upgraded. How is that waste going to be handled? E-waste can contain some hazardous metals in it that need to be properly disposed of. And, from a human rights consideration perspective, you want it to be handled through a certified e-recycler so that it is not contributing to really bad labor practices in other parts of the world. So those could be requirements that you put in. The financing and making sure that there are decommissioning bonds or other financing tools in place so that if the facility completely fails and is closed, the local government is not left holding the bag with a giant warehouse full of hazardous waste that's very expensive to get rid of. So we have a small reference in our model ordinance that could be expanded upon, but that's a very important thing to look at is how we handle disposal of waste from physical electronic waste from these facilities.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Another one here from Dana. Hope I got that name right. Hi, I'm from Effingham County resident. Will OHM be leading any efforts here to call for a moratorium and/or new ordinance for data centers? And if so, how can I help y'all? Thank you.
I mean, I would certainly argue that the process, insofar as we understand it now, that Effingham went through to add data centers to their zoning is really insufficient. This is not a bank or a hairdresser or a gas station. This is something that is on a truly transformative scale in general and mind-bogglingly, that's a tough one, transformative when you think about what OpenAI has proposed and just how massive it is. So yes, I would argue that their process to date has been woefully insufficient to the scale of what we're dealing with, and that, uh, the county commission should institute a moratorium and strengthen their ordinance. Frankly, at this time, I don't see that happening. I think it is still valuable as an Effingham County resident to reach out to the chair of the county commission, who is elected at large, Mr. Ron, and whatever district you live in, whoever your district representative is, to voice your concerns. I think it's valuable to do that because they need to understand that people are concerned about this, and silence in a lot of ways is a tacit approval of their actions. So even if I do not believe that the county commission is going to entertain those changes, they still need to hear about it from you. We are, like I said, just started 6 days ago, so everybody's trying to figure this out. But we are working with other organizations in the area and trying to elevate Effingham County community groups. A few have popped up just in response to this, to all work together to have a strong, united response to this. I'm wary about saying we are going to lead it. I don't really see that as our role. I think it is, we are here to support the people who live in Effingham County to lead on their own and shape their own destiny. But yeah, we will be involved. And in the coming weeks, there will be some more information coming out from this coalition we're putting together and joining on what people can do. But for now, email and call your local elected official in Effingham County.
Yeah. And some clarifying points on that, Dana. A lot of people don't know how you're zoned or who your commissioner necessarily is. That should all be on your county's official county government website, and we can get you those resources. It's also available on your My Voter page. If you're a registered
Yeah.
voter, it will tell you your how your commission is zoned or what commissioner zone you are in, I should say.
Yeah. And
Um,
Eric, we can include a link to the My Voter page
yes.
in the follow-up email. Or
Yeah.
you could go to My Voter page, just search My Voter page, Georgia, and put your information in, and it will tell you all of that information about, what district you're in. And then you'll probably have to go to the website and figure out, who is on each district. But it's a
Yeah.
quick process to find
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say about that too is that a role that OHM plays and has played in the past when we talk about supporting community is doing educational outreach on how to give public comment and how to be effective in your messaging and how to elevate voices. And so those are all things that are available if you do reach out and have a community group or someone that you want to, sit down with within our org. So please do reach out in that way. So,
Yeah, and sorry,
Blake,
Eric, I
oh,
hate to
go ahead.
jump in again real quick, but I think this is an important message for all of this is I think a lot of people are understandably very distressed about the way this news came out, and it does feel like this is catastrophic. And we have a lot of concerns about how this process came out and what is being proposed. And quite frankly, we are very skeptical about the claims that this is going to use as little water as OpenAI says. Very skeptical about that. But facilities like these are massive and they take years to build. So I appreciate the energy that a lot of people have right now, but it's also important to realize this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And you might feel really compelled, like I have to act now, I have to do something now. And we all have our role to play. And that just might be a little bit down the road. And because we still have to work as a group and a coalition to figure out where are the points where we can intervene and have an impact, and it takes time to figure that out. But you can take comfort in the fact that this facility is not going to be built next month. It's going to take years to develop this thing. So there will be time and opportunity, and you just need to keep that energy for when that opportunity arises.
Yeah, sure. Blake has two questions here. We'll kind of do them both together. The first one, I think that's important. The one that I think is important to do first is he says, I feel like data centers have started popping up everywhere, but I had not heard of them before a few years ago. What was used to store information from the internet before data centers? And I think that I'll take a stab at this, and then if everyone else wants to answer. Cloud computing removes the ability of your basically individual computer that you're on to process. And so we've moved that processing power into the clouds. And then AI then uses that cloud as well to process using those large language models. So it's the proliferation of AI, it's the proliferation of cloud storage, and the kind of demand of businesses and industry to have everything instantly all at once with no drop in data quality. And so there have been data centers for a very long time. Those data centers were often on the campus of a university that housed its data that it created locally. It had its processing power on site. When we moved to cloud storage, a lot of that moved offsite, and then there was this idea that an investment in a specific university size campus for data centers is the way that we should do it so that we can host these large areas that process all this data all at once. So um, I hope I got that. If there's any clarification from y'all, let me know. But I think that's a decent overview of why we're seeing a proliferation is mostly having to do with AI and cloud computing as the future and moving away from that happening within your local computer or your universities or your business's local computers servers.
Yeah, cloud computing as a concept, there's cloud storage services like your Dropboxes, your OneDrives, your Google Drives have been around for a while now. I'm trying to think of the first time I ever used one of them. It's probably been a decade or more, a little more. Um, those, I think, continued quietly apace, and people weren't really aware of this as an issue because data centers have become a national issue primarily because of the growth of generative AI and the large language models that power that. And it's really the growth of that industry and the shocking amounts of, capital investment that we have seen behind that to try to make that a ubiquitous aspect of our lives, that is driving this. This is a massively speculative market right now. And that I think is really what has made this sort of feel like a steamroller. These companies are racing to get the physical infrastructure up that they need to support uh, the products that they are trying to push into every aspect of our lives. So that is why it seems like the build out and the pace of this is so aggressive. Facilities like this, as Eric said, have existed for a long time, but now we're just seeing them, frankly, kind of metastasize and spread throughout areas where before they might have been a quieter facility. And we saw this a miniature version of this with the crypto boom. And I think that that is a very important and illustrative tale of what happens when some of these technological projects and promises butt up against reality and people's interest in using them. Crypto as a as a sort of speculative market has really collapsed on itself. It's nowhere near what it was during the pandemic, and I think that offers a cautionary tale of what might happen if this rollout continues unabated and it turns out these products and generative AI services are not as revolutionary as these companies are pitching them to be.
No, and I'd just like to step in and add, we can keep saying it's our use, our use, our use, and that puts the onus on the people, but it's really about the consumption of these large entities, right? So we talk about water, and it's usually drinking water because it's high quality equipment that they want to keep cool. And so your best use of your drinking water is for humans. But also, too, it's the rate hike that is going to be occurring around these communities that live there. And actually, the North Carolina Attorney General has actually spoken against this, and he's urged their regulators to create a separate rate class for data centers, because they were pitched at least a 50% rate hike, and now they've come back down a little bit, but they're still having the realization of the impacts to the community. So we can try to look at it in different ways of how consumptive they are, and water too. So we just need to be conscious of that, of what they're going to do to our communities.
Yeah, for sure. To that end, Blake also asked, is the OpenAI data center in Effingham County a done deal? And to
No.
be clear, I think our answer as an organization is no. I think our answer as individuals is no. And I think that what we want to always remember is, like Jeff said, the scale of this build out is massive, and we're talking about 2028 before anything even happens on site as far as storage or bringing online. So there is time to organize. Please be aware of that. Please be following us as we um, develop strategies around what to do about OpenAI and Effingham County.
Yeah,
Um,
it is not a done deal. They, I think, say that because convincing people it's futile to resist is a very savvy move. Um, but it is not a done deal. They are at the very beginning of this process, and there are several approval steps that they will need to go through to get this permitted. The county commission will have very little say in this because, as I've said, they adopted a very I mean, as weak of an ordinance as you could possibly get. So the county commission might not have much of a say in this, but state level regulators will. If they want to have diesel generators on the site to provide backup power, which they almost certainly will because they have to have some level of redundancy in backup power. That's going to require an air permit. As they continue to build and grade this site, that's going to require an Erosion and Sedimentation Control Act permit. If there are wetlands on the site that they're going to fill, that is going to require a Clean Water Act permit, a Section 404 permit from the Army Corps. I can't guarantee that any of those will come up, but like I said, they're at the very beginning of this process, and this is going to take a long time to build. So this is not a done deal. Might be from their perspective, but it's not reality.
And thanks for everyone for sticking around. We do have two more questions left. We're going to try to get through those pretty quickly, but if you feel like you have questions, do reach out individually to us. The last two are kind of about kind of where different counties have different stances. So one says some counties are keeping quiet, not committing to or for data centers, no real stance. What can residents do to ask counties to ban data centers as a preventative measure? And I'll take a stab at answering this one. I think the thing that we talked about is a ban is one thing, a moratorium is other. So while a ban may be really hard to do, a moratorium and pressing pause to develop an ordinance that is really based in community values is the best route that we've seen and the most effective way to engage with your county or your city. Bans are possible. Bans are hard. It's hard to say no, especially in such a pro-business state. It's hard to say no to a business venture being built out in an area. So we think moratoriums is the best and most applicable route in that situation. Um, and then the last one says people are fired up. Yep, we're feeling that. We don't want these data centers to transform our communities. What are your plans and how can we help or volunteer? And I'm gonna assume that this is Effingham centric, so I might let Jeff answer. But if Kat has anything, because I know there's active projects in your area, please feel free to answer as well.
Yeah, I would say it kind of echoes my response to Dana that this is going to be a slow burn. It's going to take time. You know, as I mentioned, we are working with some of the other organizations and groups that we know um, to form a coalition to respond to this. When that happens, there will undoubtedly be a social media site and presence for us. So I would hold on and wait for that. If you want to figure out how to find out about that, I would say we will definitely advertise that on our social media. So if you want to follow our social media or sign up for our newsletter, that information will come out there. But and there might be very specific tasks in the future. We might need people out door knocking and speaking to their neighbors. We might need to rally people to provide public comment on a specific permit that this facility is going to need. And so, that information will get out and will highlight there. But for right now, if you're asking like right now what I can do, if you live in Effingham County, talk to your neighbors about this, talk to them about your concerns, make them aware that this is happening and let them and direct them to good resources that talk about this issue. And like I said, reach out to your elected officials. I don't think the county commission is going to change their mind on this, but they need to hear from you. And we are a non-political organization. We do not endorse candidates or anything like that, but I can certainly tell you, you have every right to vote and exercise the franchise and make sure that, you are voting in line with your concerns and your priorities and values on this issue.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think, what Jeff highlights there is that with any issue that we're dealing with, we try to highlight engagement points for the public. And so if we find those out, we will let you know and look for those updates on our social media, like Jeff said, at 100miles.org, or reach out directly to us if you're looking for volunteer opportunities around this issue. So, thank you so much for joining us. Is anyone has any last words? I know we're about 10 minutes over, but we'd be expecting from OHM, from my email address, this presentation with its resources, a recording as soon as we get that live and up and available, and then a link to that My Voter page in the follow-up that we talked about, so you can learn who represents you and what their stance is on data centers in coastal Georgia. Thank you all. And yeah, we'll see you hopefully at issue investigation number 4, August 11th, coming up in the middle of August. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for attending.